Vlad Dracula, The Bloody Path to Power. When we left the tale of Vlad in our previous episode, he was still a young man, molded by captivity under the Ottomans, scarred by betrayal, and burning with an ambition sharpened by humiliation. His childhood was not the gentle one. It was a chessboard where kings, sultans, and voivodes moved their pieces, and Vlad himself was often the pawn. Yet this pawn would not remain on the edge of the board forever. Tonight, we begin the story of Vlad Dracula's first taste of power. A reign short-lived, but a reign that set in motion his bloody legend. The year is 1447. The political ground of Wallachia trembles under shifting loyalties. Vlad's father, Vlad II Dracula, is assassinated. His elder brother, Mirsha II, is brutally murdered. Some accounts say buried alive by political rivals. For young Vlad, it was more than the loss of family. It was the searing realization that Wallachia was no land for mercy. Princes did not inherit their thrones. They clawed their way to them with blood. But the boy who had grown up hostage to the Ottomans was no stranger to the ruthless ways of power. He knew what it meant to be used, what it meant to be discarded, and above all, what it meant to survive. The first reign, a puppet prince. In the aftermath of his father's death, Wallachia was thrown into chaos. The powerful Hungarian regent John Hunyadi had his own designs on the region. He installed Vladislav II as the new ruler, a man loyal to Hungary's interests. But the Ottomans had their own plans. Seeing opportunity, they released young Vlad Dracula from captivity. With their backing, he was thrust forward as a rival claimant to the throne. Thus, in late 1448, at just 17 years old, Vlad Dracula briefly ascended the throne of Wallachia. His first reign lasted only a few weeks, but its significance was monumental. This was the boy prince's first taste of absolute power, the moment where his destiny began to take. But Wallachia was not ready for Vlad. His grip was weak, his support fragile. The Hungarians, unwilling to let Ottoman influence grow, swiftly crushed his claim. Vlad was driven out, fleeing into exile. Yet in those fleeting weeks of rule, something awakened within him. He had sat upon the throne, even if only for a moment. He had felt the weight of the crown and the intoxicating taste of authority. And once a man has tasted power, he is never content without it again. Exile, the furnace of revenge. After his failed first reign, Vlad became a wanderer. He sought refuge in Moldavia, under the rule of his uncle, Bogdan II. For a time he remained in hiding, sharpening both his political skills and his hunger for revenge. But exile was not peace. It was a crucible. Wallachia remained a land divided, torn between Hungarian and Ottoman interests. Nobles, the boyars, played their dangerous games, shifting loyalties with the winds of power. For Vlad, exile was an education. He watched, he learned, and he waited. It was during this time that Vlad's worldview hardened into something both practical and terrifying. He saw how easily loyalty could be bought, how quickly betrayal followed kindness. He concluded that fear was stronger than friendship. In his mind, mercy was weakness. If he were ever to rule again, it would not be with the open hand of kindness, but with the iron fist of terror. The return, blood and iron. By 1456, the winds of fate shifted once more. John Hunyadi, Hungarian's great military leader, fell in battle against the Ottomans. His death left a vacuum of power, and Vlad seized the opportunity. Supported now by the Hungarians themselves, he marched back into Wallachia. Vladislav II, his rival, stood in his way. In a dramatic confrontation, Vlad challenged him directly, and history tells us Vladislav fell in single combat. At last, the throne of Wallachia was his. But this time, Vlad Dracula was no boy prince. He was a hardened man carrying scars of betrayal, exile, and humiliation. And he was determined that no one, no Ottoman, no Hungarian, no boyar, would ever rob him of power again. The birth of the Impaler. Vlad knew that his greatest enemies were not always foreign armies, but his own nobility. The boyars who had betrayed his father, who had buried his brother alive, who shifted their loyalties with every gust of fortune. They were the true cancer of Wallachia. So he invited them to a feast. It was Easter of 1457, a holy day of resurrection and joy. Vlad, newly crowned voivode, welcomed the boyars into his court with lavish celebration. But as they drank and feasted, Vlad's soldiers surrounded them. With a voice like steel, he accused them of treachery, of the betrayal of his father and brother. Some he executed on the spot, others he impaled. And the survivors, men, women, even the elderly, were forced to march on foot to the mountains, where they were worked to death building Vlad's fortress at Poniari. It was not merely revenge, it was a lesson. Vlad Dracula would not be a prince who bent to the will of scheming nobles. He would be their master or their executioner. Thus began the reign of Vlad the Impaler. Terror as a weapon. From this point on, Vlad's rule became synonymous with cruelty, but cruelty with purpose. He transformed terror into a political strategy. Highwaymen and thieves were hunted mercilessly. Corruption among officials was punished not with fines, but with the stake. In one famous story, a merchant came to Vlad's court complaining of a stolen purse. He promised justice. The purse was returned, but with extra coins hidden inside. When the merchant reported the excess, Vlad rewarded his honesty. Had he kept silent, he too would have met the stake. It was brutal justice, but it worked. For the first time in living memory, the roads of Wallachia became safe to travel. Even enemies admitted that under Vlad's reign a golden goblet could be left unguarded in the town square, and none would dare steal it. Fear, Vlad believed, was stronger than law, and through fear he forged order. Shadows of a legend. But peace in Wallachia was always fragile. The Ottomans grew restless, demanding tribute. Hungary eyed the throne greedily. Enemies circled like wolves. Vlad's reign would not be one of quiet prosperity, but of constant battle. Still, in these years, the legend of Vlad Dracula began to grow. Foreign merchants whispered tales of forests of impaled corpses, of rivers running red with blood, of a prince who ruled through terror so absolute that even the birds of the sky seemed to obey him. To his enemies, he was a monster.